Hey everybody, it's Matt Hsu from Upright Health. In today's video, we're going to be talking about shoulder impingement tests. If you're watching this video, you may have some trouble going overhead with your hand and your arm. You might have some of this shoulder mobility problem, in which case you might want to check out one of our other videos. You'll find a couple in the description section that you might find helpful. You may also be somebody who helps other people with shoulder problems. And if that's the case, you might be curious about shoulder impingement tests and how useful they are in helping you help other people solve their problems. In any case, you're going to be hearing about a study that's really interesting because it looks at 11 different shoulder impingement tests and looks at how accurate these tests actually are. In 2010, there was a study published called The Value of Physical Tests for Subacromial Impingement Syndrome, a study of diagnostic accuracy. So in this study, they looked at 11 really common popular shoulder pain tests and looked to see how accurate these were in figuring out who had shoulder impingement and a couple other different shoulder pain issues. So when you're looking at the traditional medical model of trying to identify things that are causing you shoulder pain, a lot of times you're looking for something that's pathological. You're looking for something that appears damaged either in an X-ray, MRI, or ultrasound, and that appears to be related to pain or some symptoms that you elicit using a physical test. So in this study, they looked at 11 of those tests. Two really popular tests for shoulder impingement are the Neer's sign and Hawkins and Kennedy tests. There's also painful arc, abduction weakness, abduction pain, external rotation weakness, external rotation pain, empty can weakness, that's like if you're emptying a can, empty can pain, so if someone's resisting and it hurts, full can weakness and full can pain, and I'm assuming they don't actually give you a full can. In these tests, basically what they wanted to see was if the test says that you have a problem, does that relate to your having shoulder impingement in the actual ultrasound? And so what they actually found should really make you think about the value of these tests and think about the value of the approach to trying to troubleshoot using some of these tests. I'm a trainer and I work with people on a regular basis who have shoulder pain issues, who have been told it's because of this structural deformity or it's because of this structural damage. And many times what we find is if you're training carefully and you are looking to just increase mobility, increase stability, increase control, regardless of what the structural deformity is, you can make a huge difference. And there seems to be a growing body of evidence towards that based on what we're reading here. So in terms of the accuracy rates that they came up with, it's actually quite surprising. So these are tests that get quite frequently in clinical settings. Physical therapists use these, orthopedic doctors will use these tests. And when you look at the accuracy numbers, they're really surprising. So there's three things that we need to look at. One is sensitivity and specificity. So sensitivity is a score of how good a test is at telling you when somebody has a thing, and specificity is how good a test is at telling you no, somebody does not have that thing. And then finally, the third thing is accuracy. So with specificity and sensitivity and specificity, you're generally looking for very high ratings. You want the percentages there out of 100 to be hopefully over 90%, to at least be somewhat considered somewhat useful. And in all these tests, what you find is the sensitivity and specificity rates are really quite low. They do not approach that 90% range. So for example, the Neer's sign has a specificity of 0%. It was unable to actually tell you that somebody didn't have something. So basically, if you have a really low specificity number, it's basically gonna never give you a particularly certain result. It's basically very likely to give you a high false positive, high rate of false positives if it has a high sensitivity. So for example, the Hawkins and Kennedy test, The sensitivity was at 74.1%, so like okay sensitivity, and its specificity was as bad as a coin flip, 50%. So if you didn't have shoulder impingement, this test still had a 50-50 chance of telling you that you do have shoulder impingement. The same pattern applies throughout all of these tests. There was abduction weakness, specificity is only 50%. The lowest one was actually, well, there's the 0. The next one was a full can pain, 25% specificity. The highest sensitivity number was Hawkins and Kennedy at 74%. So, nothing really great here. So, the easier number for most people to relate to is actually the accuracy number that just measures how good these tests were at telling you whether or not you had shoulder impingement, period. Regardless of sensitivity and specificity, how did it do? Did it get the positives right? Did it get the negatives right? And the highest rated test was the Hawkins and Kennedy, which had an accuracy rate of only 71%, so C- student. Neurosine, one of those really popular shoulder impingement tests, only got a 54.5% accuracy rate. So the other ones all hover around 50%. If you want to actually see the full list, you can always go to the link that we'll have in the description to this actual study. So for shoulder impingement, all of these tests came out with very, 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 very low accuracies. And in fact, one of the conclusions of this study was the predictive values of these tests are shown to be variable. I'm paraphrasing slightly. It indicates that the clinical tests identified have limited use in informing diagnosis. Emphasis on the management of dysfunction may be more appropriate rather than reliance on clinical tests with inconclusive sensitivity and specificity if ultrasound scanning is not available. So basically what they're saying there is these tests don't really give us that much useful information, particularly around shoulder impingement. So maybe we shouldn't be relying on them as much as we do. So you just think about it. If you have tests that are only giving you accuracy that hovers around 50%, you're literally talking about coin tosses with every test. So even if you were to, say, combine 3 of these tests to try to gain certainty around whether or not somebody has some bone deformity, you're actually not doing anything to increase your certainty. It's like if I said, well, I'm pretty sure you have this thing, so I'm going to flip a coin, and if it's heads, you might have the thing that I think you have, the disease, whatever it is. Oh, it's heads. Okay, I'm going to flip a coin again. If this one is also heads, it gives me a good probability that you have this thing. It's heads again. Flip it again. Heads again. You've definitely got this thing. The coin flip, that 50% accuracy rate, it's not really going to increase your certainty to run a bunch of different tests. And in fact, as we've seen with some hip physical tests, when you do a combination of tests that have very low specificity numbers and high sensitivity numbers, you actually greatly increase the chance that you're going to get a false positive. In some cases, you may have no other probable option than to come up with a false positive when you combine tests like that. So food for thought. One of the things that we really encourage people to do when they're thinking about shoulder pain, joint pain, if it's the knee, the hip, or it's their backs, is to really think about muscles, because muscles are always something that you can train and control. Yeah, there may be things like, that show up in x-rays and MRIs, like arthritis and labral tears and things like that. But just as we've seen in medical history, those things may not be as important as we currently think. And the perfect example of this is back pain. For decades, it was believed that arthritis, slip discs, disc degeneration, all these things that showed up in x-rays and MRIs were the clear reason why people were having back pain. And so back surgery was the strong recommendation for it. And it was only after many years that studies actually came out and said, hey, there's actually no relationship or very weak relationships between what we see in the x-rays and MRIs and actual experience of back pain. So with the shoulder, it's definitely something to consider. If you're thinking about muscles, thinking about how to retrain muscles to control your joints to control your shoulder, if you can train those muscles to move these bones correctly, you have the potential to really feel more comfortable, gain confidence, and be able to move the way that you want to move, regardless of what any tests or images say. So my strong invitation to you, if you're somebody who's on that journey, is to do a little more research, check things out. If you're interested in a program to help you train your shoulders, definitely check out the Shoulder Fix. You'll find a link to that in the description below. And please remember to subscribe to the channel. If you found this video helpful, share it with somebody. They would probably find it helpful too. And as always, please remember, pain sucks. Life shouldn't.